Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming at you with another Learn to Play Traveler Mongoose 2nd Edition. We are using the Traveler core rules right here to explain the rules to you, and I'm going chapter by chapter. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about space combat. I'm going to go ahead and show it right here on the side so you can follow along with the pages that I'm looking at. And I've also got a few things here on the table that is going to help you understand space combat and maybe even use this system yourself. This is a system that I think will work really well. Why do we worry about space combat? Well, in the future, you have pirates, you have alien races that might be hostile, you have two neighboring empires that might be fighting. You need to know how ship-to-ship combat works. Just like in Star Wars, right? You're going to have the rebellion against the empire, but you also have like dogfights between fighters, and you have big capital ships fighting each other. And then like in Babylon 5, you got capital ships and fighters, and in Star Trek you got capital ships and fighters. And so basically you have all different types of ship-to-ship combat. Not all ships have weapons. Sometimes you're unarmed and you've got to flee. Sometimes you are the pirate and you have extra weapons, or you're trying to disable them and not destroy them. And so we're going to go through all those rules here in the rulebook. Okay, so now they're talking about combat rounds. Combat between spacecraft is similar between travelers, and it's also similar to the vehicles. It uses 6-minute combat rounds rather than the 6 seconds. Each traveler on board takes up a particular position or duty on board, such as either the pilot, the gunner, or the engineer. In each round, every traveler will have the opportunity to perform actions or move between positions. When a spacecraft is involved in combat against travelers or vehicles directly, or against other spacecraft in close range, 10 kilometers or less, we're going to use the close range combat rule. Basically, they call that dogfighting, because you're just so. Okay, the combat steps. Basically, combat steps is kind of like an order that it's like a sequence of play. You have the maneuver step. In order of initiative, every ship maneuvers based on its thrust. Okay, so now before we get into all of this, because I'm going to use this as an explanation, this is a ruler, right? And you can see these extra ones out here. There's actually about 4 more or maybe 5 more of these little cards because weapons have an extremely long range. And on the range rulers, I've got 1 kilometer, 10 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 1250, 2000, 4000, 6000, 8000, 10,000, and that goes all the way up to 180,000 just on these. In the middle, it says, like, well, on the bottom it says adjacent, close, short, medium, long, then very long, and distant, right? And that's based on transition. When we go to the maneuver step, and it shows on page 156, it'll show you thrust required and the distance. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. But and in the middle, I also put, like, that's dogfight range, and then up here I put the pluses you get because you're so close, the zeros you don't get, and then the -2s, the -4s, the -6s to shooting those people at those ranges. So I found that online. I printed it out and I mounted it on some cardstock. And when our ships get into combat, we're going to use these ranges between ships. Traveler, you could think Traveler is in 3 dimensions, right? Because, and this is a concept, I'm stepping away from the book just for a second. The concept of space combat is that there's 3 dimensions, right? 3 dimensions. You got, your up, down, left, right, forward, and backwards, right? 2 ships, it should be able to dogfight around, up, down, and around, right? So why does Traveler use 2-dimensional plane to represent? Well, first of all, it's easy. You got a table, that's what you got. I wouldn't want to have to like have an antenna that measured a ship down here to one down there and flying around like this. Okay, usually ships are either like 1 against 1 or 1 against 2 or something like that. And when that's the case, if you only have, and those, we'll call these points of interest. If you only have 2 points of interest, you only need a straight line. That's all you need, because no matter how high he is, it's still a straight line. So you can measure it like this. If there are 3 points of interest, then you can still do it on a flat plane, because if he goes up, it's a flat plane like this. See what I'm saying? So you can't get 3 dimensions until you have a 4th object. If you only have 2 or 3 objects, you're not getting a 4th dimension, a 3rd dimension. No. You would only be getting a 3rd dimension, right? 3-dimensional, you'd only get a 2-dimensional plane with 3 objects, 3 points of interest, like a triangle. So the way space combat is conducted is just all that matters is the distance between you and your target. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if he's higher than you or lower than you, because in space there's no relative up or down anyway. So you just face your target. This is all one plane. So it doesn't matter if he's turned sideways or like this. It's all still just one flat plane. Okay, enough of that. Crew duties. No, let's get back to the maneuver step. You got the maneuver step. So in order of initiative, each maneuver is based on thrust. And we'll get into the maneuver step right there. Then you go to the attack step. In order of initiative, each ship attacks using weapons or boarding action. Then there's 3, the action step. In order of initiative, ships perform other miscellaneous actions, such as repairing, jumping out of system, or launching craft. Once the action step is complete, the round is over, start a new round. It's really super simple, right? So you just go move, shoot, other actions. Move, shoot, other actions. And you just do it in order of initiative. Okay, crew duties. Before we get to the maneuver step, go to crew duties. Every traveler on board can have a duty. He said duty. Okay. Pilot. Okay, he's the one that is responsible for flying and taking evasive action. Captain. He commands the ship. He uses his leadership and tactics skill. So if you're not in a captain position, you can't use your leadership. You're too busy flying or doing one of these other tasks. You have to be able to see the big picture. So you have to step back and be the captain. Engineer. Engineers can be assigned to the power plant, the maneuver drive, and the jump drives, or handle general damage control. They're usually assigned to one of those areas. Sensor operator. That position engages in electronic warfare, if you have that ability. Then turret gunner. Each turret has its own gunner. A traveler must be used in a turret. He is manned at the start of the combat. Each turret has its own gunner. A traveler must choose which turret he is in at the start of the combat. A bay gunner. Some ships have bays, big weapon racks that fire massive weapons. A marine. He's basically ready to board or ready to repel boarders. Passengers. Well, they just hide. And then there's possible actions related to each duty later in the book. Okay, there's automated duty. You can let the computer shoot your guns for you if you want. If you have repair drones, they can be out there repairing. And if you have an intellect program or an expert engineer, it can act as an engineer for you. Same thing as a pilot. If you have an intellect program running that acts as a pilot, it can act as a pilot. Facing and firing. It doesn't matter where you're facing. In space, you know, like you're going to have ships turn sideways, you're going to get full broadsides, they might be flying like this, you might be flying like that. It doesn't matter. It's assumed you're going to be able to fire all your weapons because you shoot, you got a whole minute. So he fires, he flips, he fires, so all weapons fired. When you get within dogfight range, which is close, then you have to worry about phase. Okay, starting a battle. Before the battle begins, it's important to note where the ships are. So you need to know exactly how far apart they are. And this is the range bands right here. And then you roll for initiative. Once the initiative, okay, now I'm saying that I've got a ship here at 21,000 kilometers, and that's the player's ship. Player's ship is always right there and never moves. Relative to the other targets is what moves. Okay, so initiative. Once the initiative positions, you roll initiative. You roll 2 dice plus the pilot's skill plus the ship's thrust. So if it's a high thrust ship, like let's say it's a 6 for them and it's a 2 for them, they'd get a +6 on their initiative. He's getting a +2 on his initiative. So better pilots and bigger maneuver drives mean you act. In addition, the commander of the spacecraft can make a tactics navy check at the start of the battle to determine initiative for his whole fleet. Surprise. Under normal circumstances, surprise is very difficult to achieve in space. But maybe he was behind an asteroid and he jumps out, maybe it's surprise. Basically, it just means he gets to act first, and then it goes into initiative. Okay, in the maneuver step, in order of initiative, That's everything. Everything's in order of the amount of thrust required to increase or decrease a range band between ships by one category up or down. Okay, so if you look at the chart, we're going to skip to the next page. On the chart, it says, let's look at long, right? It says it takes 10 thrust points to change your range band. So for him to go to medium or to very long, it would cost 10 thrust points. Now, the way this measurement stick works is the long range band has 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It has 9, so the 10th one would actually put you in the next range band. So instead of having to keep track of how many thrust points you've spent to increase your distance, or to how many thrust points you spent to decrease your distance, it's been simplified. This is a ruler between targets, and if he's got a thrust of 4 and he's trying to get closer to the players, simple enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Puts you right there, right? If he's trying to extend the distance, like he's running, and he's got thrust 6, then we just move this guy back 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that would be the relative at the end of maneuver phase where they're at. If he wanted to close the distance by 4 and went 1, 2, 3, 4, and he wanted to close the distance also by 6, he would move 6 spaces closer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, the player ship never moves. Now you have a relative range. Okay, this makes this chart so much easier, in my opinion. Okay, so now you have combat maneuvering, right? We're not in the attack step, but we got combat maneuvering. Any remaining thrust that has not been allocated to movement can be used for combat maneuvering. So let's back him up 6. So if the players wanted to close the distance, but they didn't want to use all 6 thrust points on movement, maybe they only wanted to use 4, then he would only move 4, right? And then they could have 2 remaining thrust points to spend on either aiding the gunners, docking, evasive action. Aid the gunners gives you a plus to hit, and evasive action gives them a minus to hit you. So it's up to you how you want to do it. Okay, so if he uses the aid gunners, if you spend a point for aid gunners, he makes a piloting skill roll. If he has a positive effect, then as per page 60, if the effect is 0, then he adds 0 to the gunner. If his effect is 1 to 5, he adds 1, and if he critical effect, he'll add 2 to the gunner's shot. And then evasive action is for every point that you put into thrust, you can evade 1 incoming shot and use your pilot skill as a negative DM for them to hit you. All right, so let's get to the attack step. Once all ships have worked out their movement and combat maneuvering, then they launch attacks, firing weapons. It's simple, right? It's 2 dice plus your gunner skill plus your dex die roll modifier, plus maybe any aid gunners or minus any evasive action on the target. Common modifiers. And I've already got the modifiers written right here, but basically you have short range is +1, long range is -2, distant is -4, and then, very long is -4, and then distant is -6. And then if you're using a pulse weapon, it's +2, beam weapons is +4. And then you roll to hit. And of course you're looking for an 8 or better. Okay, spacecraft damage. It's larger and able to withstand and deal damage more punishing. A new scale of damage is used for spacecraft weapons. Note that ordinary weapons is mounted upon a spacecraft. The weapon still uses the ordinary scale. Like if you have a ship that has like regular machine guns on it, then it would use normal damage scale. And remember, if you're like on ground, you divide your weapon's damage by 10, and that's how much you do to a ship. Okay, spacecraft weapons. Beam lasers, missile racks, pulse lasers, and sandcasters. There are more weapons and more things like particle weapons and mason guns and stuff like that. That's all described in High Guard. High Guard is the ship. It's the ship book. It's the book all about ship capabilities and components. Yeah, so a missile rack is 12 missiles. So a missiles use a little bit different rules because they fly to their target. Okay, some spacecraft are fitted with double or triple turrets, which allow 2 or 3 weapons to be mounted on the same turret. These weapons are different. If these weapons are different, a pulse laser, a missile rack, and a sandcaster on the same triple turret, for example, only one type can be used to attack an enemy in any round. So you can't fire all 3 in the same round. If 2 or more of the same type are fired together, the attack roll is made for all weapons fired, but each additional weapon adds +1 per damage die to the final damage total. So the example is, if a triple turret with 3 pulse lasers is fired, it only takes 1 attack roll, because they're all hitting the same thing, but it deals 2 dice plus 4 damage, because the second and third laser. Damaging spacecraft. Total amount of damage the weapon has caused, applying the effect of the attack, just like a handgun. The armor of the spacecraft is deducted, just like a person. The remaining damage goes against the hull. And then once it's been reduced to 0 hull, it's wrecked, just like a vehicle. And it becomes inoperable, beyond repair. Those on board find themselves without power and life support. Critical hits. If your effect is 6 or higher, then you do something other than just damaging the hull. You roll 2 dice on the critical hits table, and it tells you where you hit. The severity of the critical hit is equal to the damage of the spacecraft that's taken from the attack divided by 10. So if I did, just like a vehicle, so if I did 20 points of damage, the severity would be 2. But usually I'm not doing that much. Usually I'm doing like 12 or 13 points of damage. So, and this time it is rounded up. So if I did 12, I did a severity of 2. So it's for every 10 or fraction of 10 goes up. Okay, and that's on the next table over to the right. So look on the right table, the 159, and you see the target, like sensors, power plant, fuel, hull, cargo, whatever. Let's say they hit the jump drive. No, let's not. Let's say they hit, I don't know, the armor, right? Severity 1 reduces your armor by 1, right? If it was severity 2, like in that example, it reduces your armor by a D3. And if you look on the bottom left over here, it has beam, missile, pulse, and sandcaster. Tells you how many dice of damage it does. Now, you sustain damage. Even though they might not roll a critical hit on you, if you take 10% of your hit points, hull points, in damage, you automatically get a critical hit. And every 10% above that is another critical hit. Let's talk about reactions. We got reactions and then the action step. Just like in personal combat, if you take a reaction, each point of unspent thrust can allow you to attempt to dodge one attack. Okay, so that was the evasive actions I was talking about earlier. Point defense. If like an incoming missile is coming at you, you can use beam or pulse lasers to destroy the incoming missile. Sand. Okay, this is kind of a weird concept that I've only heard about in Traveler, but turrets are equipped with these shotguns full of sand, literally sand. It might be bigger particles, might be pellets, might be ball bearings, but they call it sand. And so when it fires it out, any laser coming in is dispersed. The damage is dispersed because it's hitting the ball bearing sand. So basically, if you have a target in front of you and you know they're using lasers, you fire sand like spray sand in front of you, and that laser has to penetrate through all the sand to get to your hull or your ship, and it might not do any damage or might do minimal damage. It basically gives you, it adds a d6 plus the effect of the gunnery check to your armor. So it basically increases your armor temporarily. You can also fire these ball bearings, pellets, like a shotgun at incoming boarding parties, and it does 8d points of damage. Yeah, that's a lot of damage. Okay, it's like boom. Okay, now during the action step, remember you got maneuver, shooting, and now we're in the action step. Improve initiative. If you have a captain, he can try to improve the initiative to beat out your opponent. If you have an engineer in the engine room, he can, the engineer can bring the jump time down by a d6. Engineer, offline system. He can free up power for subsequent rounds. Overload the drive. The engineer can lend the ship extra speed and maneuverability if he's got maneuver engines. He can increase its thrust. Overload the power plant. Give you extra power points. Repair a system. If something's been damaged, you can go repair it. Reload the turret. During prolonged battles, turrets mounted with sandcasters or missile racks may run out of ammunition. A turret may be reloaded by any traveler with the gunner skill, but will be unable to make any attacks in that round. That's the gunner. Sensor lock. An improved target lock can be obtained. You gain a boon if you got electronic warfare. Ship's sensor operator may attempt to jam the communications of an enemy by making an opposed electronics check, and it will also break a sensor lock if they have a sensor. Boarding action. If two ships are in adjacent range, it's possible to launch a boarding party to storm the enemy ship. And then reassignment. That's anybody. It takes your entire minute to move, or 6 minutes, to move between, or maybe it's 1 minute. It takes your entire 6 minutes to move from like maybe pilot to engineering, or gunner to engineer, or sensor operator to pilot, or something like that. So if you want to move a position on the ship, you have to take one of your combat rounds. Okay, missile combat. Missile combat is a little bit different in that when you launch missiles, I'm going to place missiles on the map, right, on our range band, okay? And missiles travel at 10 Gs. So I would just count 10 spaces closer to the target, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then these missile counters would be like there, and it's incoming, right? And so they would see the missiles in flight. Could be a single missile up to a dozen missiles, right? Some missile salvos can be fired at distant range, right? That's way out here. They have to be detected. And if it hasn't reached its target within 10 rounds, it's run out of fuel. So just make sure you're within 100 squares, because if it's moving, but then again, remember that guy could be going the other direction, so it might take the missile, he might be able to outrun the missile. Countermeasures. Most likely you'll have detected the launch, and you'll have several anxious minutes to watch blips get closer to you, but you don't have to wait idly. As missiles take several rounds to reach your target, you should keep track of the missiles as they approach, right? That's what I'm going to do, a counter. Traveler performing sensor operations can use electronic warfare to destroy or misdirect incoming missiles before they impact. So you make a roll against missiles. You can flee, like I said, you can turn and run, and maybe you'll outrun them. Point defense, finally. Just as a salvo is about to strike your gunners, basically I'm getting ready to pick it up and put it on your guy. Gunners may engage point defense, and we come over here where it says point defense, and you target the missiles, and you try to shoot them down. When a missile salvo reaches its target, the missile makes an attack roll as normal. However, the gunner skill of the traveler that fired the salvo is not used. Instead, the number of missiles remaining in the salvo is used. So for every missile in the salvo, you get a +1. So 1 missile +1, 5 missiles +5. Simple. Now note that missiles almost always have this smart trait. For missiles, use the TL of the missile itself or that of the attacking ship, whichever is greater. Okay, so if you're smart, then the difference in tech levels of either the missile or the ship is used as a positive modifier. Smart has a minimum of +1 and a maximum of +6. So +1 automatically if it's smart. And if you launch it at distant range, you will get a -6 to your attack because it has to use all of its fuel to fly straight and not be able to dodge or course correct. If the attack roll for the missile salvo is successful, the target takes damage. Roll for damage as for a single missile and deduct the armor as normal, but do not apply the effect to the attacker. Instead, any damage is then multiplied by the effect of the attack roll, and the effect cannot exceed the number of missiles. Multiple missiles. It's not each one does damage. Boom, 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 boom. No. They technically are, but they're counted as a plus to hit, and every point over your target number is also damage. That plus to hit is equated into a plus to damage. So the salvo is one roll with the number of missiles. Close combat. When you get super close and you're in what's called dogfight range, now you're in dogfight. So spacecraft of 100 tons or more are not designed for this kind of knife fight. So basically, starships are not designed for this. Only small craft like fighters and shuttles and launches and stuff like that. So you'd get a -6. Pilots of both spacecraft make opposed pilot checks with the following modifiers. A draw means that neither ship can attack with fixed weapons. If you have a turret or something, you can still attack. The winner may choose to place the opponent's ship in a firing arc of his choice and may choose which of the opponent's firing arcs his vehicle lies. So once you get close, you leave this map basically, and you go into a dogfight mode, and you do a piloting roll, opposed. If this guy wins, he gets to decide, I want him to be in my front, and I want to be on his side, or I want to be in his rear, or whatever he feels is the best place to be. And then it would be situated like that. Winner of the dogfight can ensure all of his forward-facing weapons can attack the enemy while ensuring he stays out of his opponent's forward-facing. In addition, the winner of the dogfight gains a +2 on his attack rolls, and the loser suffers a -2 on his attack rolls. If the dogfight continues into a following combat round, the winner of the previous dogfight applies the difference between the piloting checks as a positive DM to his next opposed check. So once you're in the rear, you're going to be able to stay in the rear, basically, because he just can't shake you unless he makes a really good piloting roll. Okay, boarding actions. Boarding actions I consider to be part of the role playing. I don't really consider it to be, or the actual ground combat. I don't really consider it part of ship combat, but they have a way to just, and this is the importance of boarding actions, is when you have fleet to fleet combat. If I've got 100 ships against 100 ships or whatever, then I might not want to go to a map and put figures, move figures, and have them do the gunfighting and stuff like that. You can just roll and determine who the winner of the boarding action is. And that's kind of what this is saying. All right, and that is Space Combat. And I really recommend making your own ruler. When I saw this came on one sheet of paper, right? It had little squares and all the range bands. So what I did was I copy and pasted them all onto my own paper. I expanded the size of them so that they're a lot larger and easier to read, and then printed them out and cut them out and put them in a straight line because it's just more impactful that way. I've got a 9-foot table when we play. I'm going to be able to lay out my range. Nobody's really going to be at distant, but you never know, it might happen, right? And then the players will get to choose, okay, I see the ship way off in the distance. Their weapons don't reach me. Maybe we'll run. Maybe we'll launch missiles and see what happens. I recommend the range rulers. Maybe find some traveler miniatures out there. You can use counters. You can use little glass beads. You can use whatever you want. All right, guys. Thanks for coming out and checking out this. Okay, in the next video, we're going to briefly go over trade, and then maybe in a following video, we'll talk about psionics. I'll see you next time.